I'd like to now call upon Mr. Kamal Kishore. He is a member of the National Disaster Management Authority and also an architect from IIT Roorkee.
Where to stand? So, a very good morning to all of you. I am delighted to be here, to be at the SPA campus, where basically no pretense, and you basically have fresh energy. Even before the workshop event starts, there are things happening, people milling around, people doing things that they have not even been asked to do as part of the workshop, but are related to the theme. So it's really, really energizing. I'm very happy to be here. You have not come here to listen to me, so I will not take too much of your time. I will just say my bit in two parts. First, I want to give a little bit of a context of what this Asian ministerial business is, and then talk a little bit about the theme of building back better, and why it is important, what are the challenges globally on this, and why is it that we have we are happy that we are discussing this issue here with Students Park Lecture. So the first bit, which is a relatively less interesting bit about the Asian Ministerial Conference. Asian Ministerial Conference is something which happens every 2 years. This is the 7th one, but the first one after the latest global framework on disaster risk reduction, which is called the Sendai Framework, which was agreed to last year in 2015 in March in Sendai, Japan. 187 countries signed up to it. So this is going to be the first major big event at the ministerial level for Asia, which will shape how we will implement the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction in Asia. So that is the context of AMC-DRR. The Sendai framework was preceded by another framework for 10 years from 2005 to 2015, which was called Hyogo framework. Before that, we had something called the International Decade of Natural Disaster Reduction. When we were, when I was in, architecture school at that time, we were discussing the, predecessor framework. The whole field has come a long way. The decade of 90s, what's called International Decade of Natural Disaster Reduction. And then after that, it was called International Strategy for Disaster Reduction. And it's not a coincidence that the word natural was dropped, because there is greater understanding now that disasters are not natural, they're all man-made. Disasters happen when we build poorly in hazard-prone areas, and hazards strike vulnerable elements. So, there is this, 3 weeks ago there was a hurricane in the Caribbean, Hurricane Matthew. I don't know how many of you have followed the sort of news around that Hurricane Matthew. That we can discuss later. So Hurricane Matthew passed through 3 countries. It went through Haiti, Cuba, and the US. Florida, around Florida, the US. So this is the map. You have it right here. So when you look at this map and look at the wind speeds, what you see is that, and the area around. Confused, Diana? So this area is the highest wind speed, and then wind speeds go down here. And if you can read it, 213 km an hour, 204, 212. So if you see 231, if I can read it correctly. So if you see Cuba and if you see Haiti, in terms of how many people experience extremely high wind speed, it's about the same in Cuba as it is in Haiti. In fact, more people were exposed to high wind, more houses were exposed to high winds in Cuba than in Haiti. And I'm not even talking about the US, I'm just talking about 2 poor countries. Can we? So, but the number of deaths in these two is hugely different. There are according to sort of press reports, it's about 800 people who died here. and less than 10 people died here. So, which basically indicates that it's not the hurricane itself, it's not just 231 kilometers an hour wind speed which killed people, it's how people built, what kinds of preparedness systems were there, etc. So I think that there is a greater realization that, to use a complicated word, that disasters are endogenous to process of development. It doesn't happen from outside. It's not a prakritik apada, it's not a daivik apada, it's all manvi. It's everything is because of the way we build, because of the way we treat our natural environment, and respect for or not respect for natural hazards which causes disaster. So I think that we can take it off now. So that understanding has, infused the global frameworks as well. One big thing which has happened from the Hyogo framework, which was 2005 to 2015, and now 2015 onwards, is much greater emphasis on recovery. In the previous framework, recovery after disasters was mentioned, but in a very sort of sideways manner, very, very generic. Now, there is much greater emphasis on doing a better job of recovery. I mean, we have the stalwart sitting here of recovery, with 30, 40 years of really deep experience in recovery. They'll talk about it later, but I just want to highlight a few numbers and the kind of challenges that you face in recovery. After the earthquake in 2005, which affected, which was the epicenter in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, there was a need for about 800,000 houses, and this was in October. This is a cold region, so in 2 months, you will be hit by heavy winter. So 800,000 houses, that exceeds the global capacity to manufacture winterized tents. There are simply not, there is the factories that produce tents, if they work full time for 3 months, they cannot produce that. So in such a situation, what is the kind of innovative solution you can come up with? Of course, you cannot build a full-fledged house in 2 months for so many people, but what is the kind of intermediate arrangement you can have where you have a transition shelter, where you can protect people from winter in a cost-effective manner, where you bring together the capacities, initiatives, resources, local understanding of the affected people themselves, and not treat them as beneficiaries or subjects of your interventions, but treat them as principal actors of the whole housing approach. And the work that we have done in our own country, in Gujarat, and the ODR, the owner-driven reconstruction, this thing, that is exactly trying to sort of really turn it around. The history is full of examples of housing after disaster which has not been used, unfortunately, including in our own country. Where you come up with houses which do not match the cultural, day-to-day needs of the people, are expensive. You do not impart the technology that you are deploying there. So you're making houses which are safe for an earthquake, which might happen once in 100 years, but it's useless for everyday living. And also, when the house grows, the second room or the third room, when it is added to it, you haven't imparted the technology, so they are again going to rebuild that vulnerability. So there is a whole sort of dimension of building back better, which is very neglected. I would say on a large scale, even now it is neglected. We ourselves, we are working in Nepal. I think the need in Nepal is for 675,000 houses, and as far as I know, not even 100,000 houses have been built. But there are some estimates that maybe 150,000 houses have been built, but they've been built poorly by people because we haven't been able to support or create an enabling environment to the extent we should have. And I think there are people here who are working there, so they will shed light on that. In this whole thing, I think obviously architects have a huge role, but the role, the design is at the center of it. but the process of housing, treating housing as a process, not as a product, is also as important as the design aspect itself. Because if you just look at it like, you can't have an architect-client relationship in social housing. It is a different way of approaching housing. So I think these are some, random reflections. This is a very new kind of audience which I am speaking to after a long time. So I haven't really prepared what to say, so I'm just rambling in a rather uncoordinated fashion. And I'll stop here. I will stay for the day as much as possible and learn from what you're doing and contribute to the discussions. Coming back to AMCDRR, I need to plug in a commercial here. You are all, people have been asking that, have you been invited to AMCDRR? AMCDRR registration was open till 15th of October, and anybody could register. And then there is a process of vetting, which is more like a security clearance. It's not too complicated, and anybody can participate. It's an open content. The registration is closed, but looking at the energy and enthusiasm here, if the school can sort of coordinate that and give us a list of students and faculty who would like to participate in it as soon as possible, perhaps by Monday morning or Monday afternoon, then we will get them the passes made. It's a ministerial event, so it is there is a process. You can't just walk in. So we can organize that and have as many of you who want to come participate in it. The discussions there will be very wide ranging. If you think that there will be lots of architects there, perhaps not. Although I have to say this, that I know many architects who work in disaster risk reduction, and I have my own theory on why that has happened, but that's not for now. So, but there are some sections that will deal with the issue of build back better. There are some sections that will deal with response. There are some sections that will deal with risk reduction, stopping the creation of new risk, looking at how the built environment that is shaping up in our countries is shaped in a manner that it is resilient to disasters, and so on. So it will be very interesting, from very practical things to very sort of abstract policy level things. I would encourage you to look at the program on the AMCDRR website, and if you want to come and attend some parts of it, you will be very warmly welcome. Thank you very much.